Did they change the music? Did that sound different to you?
That was different.
That sound different, and it goes with the theme of today because we're kind of changing things up. So welcome to the Ledgie Sports Podcast, hosted by DJ Peak and Kayla Mushinski. Usually we are posting on the Peak and Roll podcast, but what kind of person names a podcast with their own name in it? No, I'm just kidding. But we're moving back over to Ledgie Sports. I think that's going to be a beautiful transition. I already like the blue background better. It'll make my eyes not hurt as much after recording, especially at this 9:37 p.m. mark. But we have a fun episode today. We're going to talk a little bit about how the draft and stash route might be in peril with the new CBA. We're going to talk about Xavier Booker at MSU and Adem Bona at UCLA. And there's some things that really bring those two guys together in terms of similarities, but there are a bunch of other things, Caleb, that are going to be a world of difference. So we're going to get going by talking about how the CBA might kind of shaft the draft and stash route. And you brought this up to me yesterday, a couple days ago. We were talking a little bit about it. So what was your initial thought on that?
Well, it's funny because with FIBA rolling out soon, like the senior men's national one, I start seeing these rosters like Dervitas Servaitis and Gabriel Procito, who we just drafted like 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, man, like we just took a Sark Thompson in the draft. We have all these other guards and wings now. It's like, this dude will never play for us, like ever, regardless if he was like 37th or not. So that's what was just giving me the initial idea of it, where maybe this will all change now, where people won't go the draft and stash route unless you're like a Washington, maybe. And you either want to stash a guy away and you're just trying to intentionally be bad, or you just want to be bad and while having an international guy play for you. You know, who knows? It was just something that was interesting to me because it's like with this new CBA and the importance of second rounders, it's just going to really change how everything works in the future.
Yeah, and I'm trying to look up currently former NBA draft and stash guys. You might have a better wealth of that, but I know Ricky Rubio was Ricky Rubio straight to the NBA?
I can't say off the top of my head. I know, like, do you remember Nikola Mirotic? He used to play for the Bulls.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He was a stash guy. He played a few years before he came over.
Yeah, this list has Ricky Rubio on it, but I didn't think that they selected him in 2009 with the 5th overall pick. Oh, I guess he played for FC Barcelona before his NBA debut. But there's like Bojan Bogdanovic, Serge Ibaka, Marc Gasol, Tony Kukoc, Manu Ginobili. And some of these might be like they played just before they made their NBA debut. But either way, That's getting away from the point here. I think when you look at these guys who are going the draft and stash route, it's not a guarantee you're going to ever make it. Or if you do, it's probably not going to be for the team that drafts you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an interesting concept.
It may not be like so much the first round guys like you just listed off there. Those are pretty highly drafted players.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much too. I know FIBA's basketball schedule runs a little bit differently than the NBA does, but yeah, it's just like more of those second round guys. Like you talk about like Procida or however you say his last name. I try not to forget about it. Knowing could have had Jaden Hardy at that pick instead, and now Dallas has him.
Yeah, but what was the guy we picked the year? What year was that? Was that 2 years ago? Was that Cade's rookie year? Balsa Koprivica.
Yeah.
And we just traded him to the Clippers, and I can't even remember what was involved with that. But
yeah, he was a Florida State guy too, so he wasn't quite international, but he had like the international background. There's another guy too on the Sixers who it just reminds me of Filip Petrusev. I don't know if that name sounds familiar, but he did play for Gonzaga, was a draft prospect, left and played some years overseas. And now he's back in the NBA circuit again. So it's just interesting to see how that's going to work, especially for like the second rounders who really aren't as touted as high as the first round guys.
Yeah, because you think with those second rounders, they're going to be so valuable to these contending teams because they need people to come in right away and play good basketball. They can't wait on guys averaging 6 and 6 in the Euro League until they blow up, become an MVP, and then can come over. It's rare that happens. And you even get the Pablo Prigionis, and I don't know if he was a draft and stash, but you get guys who are very skilled in the Euro League that come over and just don't convert right away. like
Yeah,
Milos Teodosic or can't
I
remember his
remember
last
him.
name, but with the Clippers. And I remember that was a crazy thing coming over. He was really good, especially handling the basketball, and it just didn't work too well. He ended up leaving the NBA, going back overseas. So who
Yeah,
knows?
I remember that. I haven't heard that guy's name in years.
Alexei Shved. Do you remember
I
him?
remember Chavez too. These are
That
all
was
like 2K guys from when I was in like middle school.
Yep, those were fan favorites when we were in middle school. I remember that. Um, yeah, I'm excited to kind of see how the draft and stash uh, guy for the Pistons, Gabriel Procida, do. And I might have I said his name differently, but who knows if
Who
mine's right or
knows?
yours is right. Hopefully we get to hear it someday. But who knows? Who knows with those guys? But moving forward, that was just a short little icebreaker, getting us back in the podcast mood after taking a week and a couple days off. Moving on to Xavier Booker, a 6'10, 6'11 power forward center that's going to Michigan State University. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the Pistons, and you're probably going to hear a lot more about MSU once the season starts. We could have a whole episode about, I don't know, Ohio, University of Ohio, and then we'll somehow bring up Michigan State or U of M basketball. But Caleb, I just kind of want you to talk about what you see in Xavier Booker that kind of makes him, this perfect fit for MSU.
Well, I'm excited because this is easily our highest recruit that we've had in a long time, ever since we landed Jaren Jackson many years ago. Like, that's what, class of 2017. So, yeah, 6 years ago now. Wow. Can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah, Jaren's a DPOI.
Yeah, but Xavier Booker should essentially step into the similar role that Jaren Jackson did at MSU. When you look at Michigan State last year, one thing they really lacked that they've had over the past few years is a stretch big man who's been able to shoot, whether it was Jaren Jackson or Xavier Tillman or Marcus Bingham, for those who really know about MSU and college basketball. They didn't really have that last year. They had Madi Sissoko, who was a veteran big, but played most of his game inside, and also two freshmen in Carson Cooper and Jackson Kohler. Same thing. Kohler had the little mid-range shot, but none of them were true outside players. So somebody like Xavier Booker really fits into one of those immediate needs for a Tom Izzo team, especially when you've seen his teams in the past few years and big men shooting threes. Some of them took a while to develop. Some got them right away, like Jaren Jackson being one of them. But I think this is going to give Izzo another weapon, especially for someone as big as Booker is and being able to stretch the floor while still being able to make good passes. I can't think of a more exciting piece to have. Like this and another, we'll get into him probably eventually in Cohen Carr, but this and Cohen Carr were like two players that we did not have last season that we've had for years, and we just did not have them.
Yeah, can you explain something to me? So online, when we first were able to land Xavier Booker, I think everyone was up in arms. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? I think that's a bad thing.
Oh, it's a great thing for us.
Is that a good thing to be up in arms? Like that saying?
You can take it either way.
Well, everyone was really excited. Everyone was really happy, but it feels like since then, the hype has died down a little bit and people have been saying, oh, they're excited for Fears. They're excited for Carr. They're excited more for these other guys. Like what? And this leads me to a bigger question, because when you look at Xavier Booker, he kind of came out of nowhere to becoming a top 10, top 5 guy recruit. And now he's kind of fallen back into that mid-lotto area. And obviously, when you're just topping a recruiting class, that's different than having all of these different age groups combined for the NBA. But it feels like the hype for him has really died down. And can you kind of answer that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things you could take away from it, but the way I look at it is like this. So Booker was someone who's like in the 60s or 70s when he was initially rated as a junior. Obviously, last summer in 2022 had a huge just explosion and breaking out for himself. Went all the way up to like 5th overall, I believe, in 24/7. I can't remember off the top of my head, but he was up there in like the single digits and was there for a while. But normally too was summer basketball, and this isn't a great example because he was there pretty much up all year. But Cade is a great example. He wasn't really always the most highly regarded recruit, and then he just shot up to number one. Another guy too is at least for this year, a good example is Marco Jackson, who we'll probably get into at Kansas. was someone that really was the same thing as Booker, wasn't really regarded as a high recruit, like 70s, 80s. Obviously now a 5-star guard projected to go maybe top 20 in the draft next year. But it's just what happens is they'll have these huge summer breakouts. And then maybe throughout the school year, once you get into like some actual competition through your schools and it's not all just AAU, then you really start to see like how they play against like normal competitive basketball, whatever you want to make from the high level high school, like special circuit. What I can't think of it off the top of my head, but things change throughout the years. I mean, even look at in the spring where he got down to the top 10 or 15 now. I mean, you look at there's different games like McDonald's All-American games that can really put you up and over the Jordan Brand Classic.
Yeah.
I mean, I still remember when recruiters were putting Nasir Little over Zion Williamson in the prospect rankings because he had 2 huge like high school all-star games. I mean, that obviously means nothing, but it's just what the recruiters see in like the different individual camps and stuff. But for Michigan State too, I look at some guys like Jeremy Fears and Cohen Carr. Jeremy Fears was like the first guy we got in this recruiting class. He's pretty much the originator of bringing all these guys together to one. And then, I mean, Cohen Carr has more dunk highlights this year than anybody else in the nation. Yeah. So there's a couple of reasons for that because it's very Miles Bridges-esque, and that's what really gets Spartan fans really excited because they haven't had that huge small forward dunker. I mean, Gabe Brown and Aaron Henry were athletes, but they weren't doing the kind of stuff Bridges was, and that's what Carr is currently doing. So, like, each player has their own individual like reasoning to really be excited for. But I can see where that can take a little bit away from Xavier Booker for someone who's not really a particularly flashy player. He's just acknowledged as one of the best players in the country.
And one thing I thought of as you were saying that, I feel like when you're in high school and recruiting high school basketball, I mean, it's really similar to a credit score. I mean, you're young and everything you do is going to swing either high one way or down another way. It's not like set yet. There's not like a lot of substance to go off of. And I mean, that's also similar to what we've just been talking about these past episodes about how we can talk praise about all these players because, oh my gosh, they're so good. But once you get to college, that's where a lot of things will change, and we'll be able to talk a little bit more about the bigger weaknesses. Like, obviously, all these guys have things that we can say, oh, they don't do it super well. But I mean, these guys are going pro for a reason. There's not a lot at this level that they're going to do extremely wrong. And I think a cool thing to know is that he could have chosen a lot of different programs. And that's true when you have a highly touted recruit, is there's a lot of other schools that could have gone after him. And they probably did. I mean, look at some of these other schools that sent out NBA bigs recently. You have Jabari Smith Jr. with Auburn. You have Chet Holmgren with Gonzaga. I mean, there's a list of those. And he chose MSU. Like you said, the last time they sent someone out like that was Jaren Jackson in 2018.
Yeah,
so
even Xavier Tillman in like 2020, and he was a second-round pick.
Yeah, if I was Xavier Booker, I don't know if I'd be super thrilled looking at that. But when you have a coach like Tom Izzo, and I mean, you can say what you want about Tom Izzo, and his time might be ending and all of that, but he did everything he could to recruit this guy. I mean, he made him an absolute priority. Was everywhere. And there was a quote I heard in the Spartan Spotlight podcast that had his AAU coaches on as guests, and they said Izzo was everywhere but the backyard, and he was at games that he wasn't even playing at. So, I mean, overall, just a fantastic recruiting season for Tom Izzo, getting this class and bringing it all together. I mean, people said this might be the best recruiting class MSU has on paper ever had.
Yeah, it's definitely, I wouldn't say it's with the Bridges and Cassius Winston class because that was special itself, but this is definitely it's easily the best one we've had since then. So
yeah,
to get back to like the vintage Tom Izzo when everyone was ready to count him out saying, oh, he's losing his touch. He comes out, he gifts us this 2023 class. 2024 is even looking exciting. We already have 2 4-star players, and we're in the mix for Jason Richardson's son, who's like a top 50 guy. We're also in the mix for like another small forward, 4 or 5-star player who his only official visit to my knowledge has been MSU so far. And that was his only visit he took in, I think it was just his only visit he took in all of June. So like he is a high priority, and he speaks very highly of like Michigan State and Izzo and like what they do with their perimeter guys. So
Yeah.
I mean, he's still around. He ain't going anywhere.
I think this is going to be a fun year to really get more into MSU basketball. I know I'm usually the casual enjoyer, but I mean, maybe more of a diehard this year, especially with the team they got. I feel like we've been looking over at U of M, and they've been having really, really good teams over the past few years. Not saying MSU hasn't, but I feel like U of M has been putting out high quality guys.
They have been, but then again, too, you got to look at their overall team success going on. At least MSU still has and this is no knock against Michigan or anything. I love them just as much, but I mean, that can be another video or something in the future. I'm not ready to go into that.
Yeah, we'll bring that up because we were going to have a guest on, our pal Adem, huge MSU basketball guy, huge college basketball guy as well, to talk about these guys. But he'll be on soon. We'll talk about more Michigan-based sports, and hopefully you didn't click off the video if you were here to talk about Adem Bona, because that's where we're going to move next. Unless, Caleb, did you have anything else to talk about with Xavier Booker?
Not much. I'm looking forward to seeing him. I think we covered it, how his gameplay fits already within. Just some cons too with him. I know there's people who question his consistency. You know, he's not the highest motor guy, and it's just depending on how you want to word it. But I don't really think you gotta worry about that when you have someone like Tom Izzo, especially where your do or die is just from you either come up and show up to play or you don't play at all. But I think Booker's a smart kid. He realizes he has a unique skill set, and he's going to try and utilize it to help his draft stock, because MSU is a tough place to carve a role, especially if you're a freshman. I mean, if there's people in like seniority rules, it's hard. You have to be an elite talent or just have to have a very thin roster. And then also too, I just kind of would hope to see him build up a little bit of strength between now and then too, because like I said, he's very perimeter oriented for his game right now, and it would just help that give him a little bit more on the inside.
Yeah, and I said we were going to move on, but the last also I want to say is that, I mean, if he is here for 2 years, that's not a complete loss.
Nope.
I think with his size, he can definitely grow out a little bit to go along with his attributes, and all these guys can grow, but maybe a second year to kind of get more of an NBA body could really help him. And I think usually once you're turned to a junior or a senior, that's when your draft stock plummets. But as a sophomore, I mean, he could still be in the higher lottery.
Miles Bridges and Gary Harris were both 5 stars who came back for a second year, and they still went lottery. So that's all I'm going to say.
Hey, with that good, awesome point, let's move on to Adem Bona. With his freshman season at UCLA past us already, we know his stats, so it's a little bit easier to look at the strengths and weaknesses and dissect it a little bit more. He played 33 games with 32 starts, about 23 minutes per game with about 8 points per game, 5 rebounds, about 2 blocks at 1.7 per game, 0.6 steals, 1.3 turnovers. And he shot 67% from the field and 57% from the stripe. So there's a lot we can talk about with Adem. But the first thing I want to say is that with little continuity coming into this year, with so much changing with that team, he's going to be a player that kind of holds the keys to their success. And you might say, well, he might not be the best player on the team, but I mean, if he was there last year, he's kind of that culture guy who is continuing from that past locker room. Obviously, there's probably other guys who are returning, but he's the key guy.
Yeah, I mean, this is someone he's the leading returner in minutes played per game. I think the next guy was Dylan Andrews, sophomore point guard coming in the next year, was averaging about 10 minutes a game, but had the most points per game, most rebounds per game returning, and also too led the team in blocks last year. So there's a lot already coming back with this guy and how important he's going to be, especially look like guys like Will McClendon and Dylan Andrews, who I just mentioned. They're both guards, didn't really play a lot. They also lost a lot in their front court. There's still Kenneth Awuba, but he doesn't really get too many playing time, especially now when you got the international guys coming in like Mara and Bike and Sell. That's going to really play a factor for who gets the minutes. But Bona is just going to be the energetic anchor. This is a guy with this crazy motor and that everyone just loves. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Jared Vanderbilt at Kentucky, actually, where you
Yeah.
used to have this 5-star guy who just doesn't really take this huge offensive role, but you just notice he's there the whole time. And that's why I loved Vanderbilt so much at Kentucky, is even though when he was hurt and missed some time, he still found a way to mix himself into everything. And that's Bono didn't really have the same injuries or anything, but it's just that's how you notice those guys. It's they do all the other things on the court for what you need to be done.
Yeah, and those are the guys who make championship teams in the NBA. And I mean, we just read off his stats. We know that his offensive game has a lot of work to do. Lack of touch, relies heavily on athleticism, and that's not a bad thing, especially when you're young, because you can get away with it. But as you age and you mature, you want to make sure you can gain touch, and it's easier to do it when you're younger than once you get into your ways in the NBA. But he's very raw offensively. I think that's the point I'm really trying to dig at. But his defensive game is absolutely there. I mean, about 2 blocks a game. That's in 23 minutes. That's awesome. That's awesome
Yeah.
to see.
And for someone too, for his size that can move his feet so well already, he does have some potential in case he gets dragged out away from the perimeter a bit. I mean, UCLA is going to have a bunch of bigger guys that are very versatile. You mentioned the foreign dudes all the time already who have some size. They also have a transfer, Lazar Stefanovic from Utah coming in, more size, more veteran depth. They got a couple of freshman recruits too, but at least two with Bona, if he gets switched off into something away from the rim, you're not going to be too worried about him. But you do mention his offensive game. That is obviously something that he's going to have to work on a bit. He does have a nice little spin move, or he just overpowers people just with his athleticism and pure strength alone. But that's going to have to be something that he definitely works on in the future, especially like at mid range, considering he's undersized for a true center player. And I mean, like, you look at guys like Bam Adebayo. I mean, he was the same way, doesn't really have much of an offensive game, but Bam does so many other things on the court besides, just scoring. He rebounds, plays defense on all levels, can play make. Not saying Bona's that type of guy, but when you're a bit of a smaller center like that, you got to really be able to make yourself show and like develop in some way other than just what you do right now.
Yeah, and that leads me to a next point on Bona, and it's not in our notes so far. But both these guys that we've talked about, Xavier, Booker, and Bona, I mean, they're both projected as kind of mid-lottery, mid-first guys. But it's funny because they are both projected the same, but it doesn't mean that they would both fit seamlessly on the teams in that area. I feel like they would both require different environments. I think Bona is one of those guys who could kind of go in and play right away, but it's tough because with his offense, like his defensive game is there. He could go in, play right away, make an impact, probably not on a contending team, but obviously a good play-in team, maybe team late in the standings and 8, 9, 10.
Yeah.
But you look at Booker and he might need to go to one of those bottom 10 teams.
Right. Yeah. Because Bona will be someone where if you need right now, it's like a cheap, like rookie contract, high energy player, high ceiling guy. I mean, Bona's perfect. But if you want Booker for more of like a foundational guy, like we got something here to work with, let's see where we can go in the future. That's going to be where the two of them really separate in value. I know in +2, Bona already has an extra year of experience, and this will give him a little bit more time to really show off and see like what else he can offer for a team that especially is going to be so young and just so new. So that would be interesting to see for him compared to an Xavier Booker, like we mentioned, who's going to be surrounded by all these returning players who pretty much the entire roster from last year. It's going to be two different scenarios for two different guys with games play styles. And it's pretty much just like you said, it comes down to whatever team values that kind of player or more than the other.
So what are some teams that obviously things are going to change between now and next draft? But let's say you were a team that was heavily interested in Booker, what teams would you be?
Let's say I was in like the early first round. I mean, obviously Washington would take a flyer on him just because, I mean, they're going to be bad. It just gives them another player to work with. Charlotte would definitely do that too. I could even see like if he fell enough to the Pistons. I don't think we have a second round pick this year, but just because they're in our backyard. I was just thinking about that. But as far as guys like in the late first round, I don't know if there's going to be any teams like contenders that will take a swing on them. But I think for someone though like Bona, so this was actually interesting. I was thinking of is Boston if they still have their first round pick late this year, because a good comparison I saw was Robert Williams, and they're both pretty similar, undersized centers who both played 2 years in college, were both considered high level recruits, high energy guys. And you give someone like Rob Will, who gets hurt quite often, you never really know when he's available. Bona could step in. However, I did mention he was hurt earlier. He did have a repair for a torn labrum over the offseason, which caused him to miss the combine. So maybe that's not the best replacement for Robert Williams, but
it's something.
Yeah, it's something. But I don't know. It could be someone too, like I would hate to say Denver, but anyone can play with Jokic, and this would just give a guy like. And they don't really have two like the freak athlete, strong center really anyway. So that could be an option for them if they wanted to get experimental with that.
And I guess the other thing is, who do you think would have an easier transition into a set NBA system?
This is kind of a tough one because Bona would be great for a team if you just need him to do something, but he's not really like a system player. He relies heavily on good perimeter play, and this is what's going to really be a critical piece this year for UCLA. Because if those young guards and like if Mara and Bayek Tunsell can't adapt and play on the perimeter, unlike they can, which they most likely will. I'm just saying the very small chance they will. It's just going to make Bona's job a lot more difficult because he relies so much on the pick and roll action, also catching lobs. It's like Jalen Duren. If you can't get him the ball, then it literally limits your offensive tape. But I just feel like with Bona, he's a little bit more like what to expect from him player. And so it might help him better transition because someone will know how to utilize him to his fullest. Where with Booker, he's big enough where he has so much defensive upside. He's got the offensive upside. You can play him at 4 or 5, where I don't really know where people are going to know what to do with someone like him just yet.
Yeah. And you keep saying things that bring up really good points, and maybe they're related, maybe they're semi-related, but I think just seeing Bona play with a lot of these overseas players is going to be fascinating because it merges kind of the athletic nature of the just kind of force through it with the USA style basketball with the kind of fancy, delicate. That makes it sound like not like what it is. What's a good word to describe?
Finesse.
Finesse, yes. It combines the athleticism with that finesse. And it's kind of like pairing Jokic with Aaron Gordon. Not at all like that. It's just the dynamic of having those two so opposite play styles fit together so seamlessly. And I think UCLA now in the Big Ten, or is that next year?
2024. So
2024.
We won't have him there. But unless he comes back for his junior year, then we'll see him in the Big Ten. But
well, if he does, I'd be very excited to see that. That'd be a fun addition, especially against like an MSU team who's usually pretty. I don't know. I don't want to say. I'm not going to say it. Never mind. But
I don't know. MSU is pretty fundamentally sound. I would say they just play fast.
Yeah.
And then like FIBA plays. I will say FIBA plays a little slower, like a little more tempo kind of game, but they still play a little bit more accelerated in the half court instead of just like the full court.
Yeah. But Caleb, do you have much else to say about Adem Bona, Xavier Booker?
I just hope, I know I said it before, but since Bona is a foreign guy as well, overseas player, I want to see him and like Bayek Tunsell and Mara play together, just like the 3, 6, 10 plus guys. Just kind of like how Mark Cannon, Mobley, and Jarrett Allen playing together, with Adem Bona obviously being Jarrett Allen. And then I would probably say Bayek Tunsell is more of the shooter anyway, so he'll probably be like the Mark Cannon guy. And then Mara's not really Mobley, but he's got the length like Mobley. So
yeah,
hopefully Mick Cronin can figure out a way to make that all work, but just run like 2 other foreign guards at the same time, where it's like Fibula or Vide or Stefanovic would be it would just be fun to see this all foreign team play in college ball and just completely just throw a curveball for all the other schools.
That would be really interesting to see how the opposing teams adapt to that. And I'm going to definitely watch some UCLA this year. I think that might be the most interesting team in college basketball due to kind of what they have going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we should definitely touch base again about UCLA after their first couple games, maybe have a little episode just talking about how they're surviving or how they're striving, whatever word, maybe that will be in the title, surviving or striving. It will depend on how they do. But Caleb, thanks for joining me yet again on another episode. But if you're just tuning in for the first time on the Ledgie Sports Podcast, it's your first. You can check out all of the older episodes on the Peak and Roll channel. That'll be in the description, but we're going to kind of stick to the Ledgie Sports channel from here on out. Thanks for joining us. Peace out.